She used to think she was lucky. Not because her life was perfect, but because she believed she had been chosen. In every room, she stood beside a man people respected. Not for his kindness, but for his potential. A man others listened to. A man whose future felt inevitable. And her? She was the woman seen next to him. Not ahead. Not behind. Just close enough. To be useful, but quiet enough. To be forgotten. At work, when his name was mentioned, the tone shifted. Approval. Confidence. Expectation. She noticed everything. She always did. She was the first to stay late, reviewing numbers that weren't hers. The first to believe in ideas that existed only as promises. The first to say, calmly, I'm here. I've got you. No drama. No demands. Just trust. And that was the first mistake. She didn't know. Some men love support, but fear partnership. She didn't know. Help given too early is no longer help. It becomes investment. Without protection. Among friends, everything looked right. Laughter. Plans. Big dreams spoken out loud. And she? Instead of being seen, she was watching. She thought this was maturity. Commitment. Building something real. But the truth was simpler, she was spending herself on a future that had never proven it deserved her. And no one told her. Not even herself. The first warning didn't arrive loudly. It never does. It came disguised as progress. He began to change, subtly at first. Longer meetings. New contacts. Different circles. He started speaking less with her. And more at her. Decisions were no longer discussed. They were announced. This is better for us, he'd say, already halfway out the door. She adjusted. She always did. She told herself growth required flexibility. That strong women didn't cling. That trust meant giving space. So she gave it. She took on more responsibility. So he could focus. She covered gaps he created. She softened conflicts he avoided. At work, people began associating competence with his name. The success had a face now. And it wasn't hers. She noticed the shift in language. I built. I decided. I risked. The we disappeared quietly. And still, she stayed. Because she believed history mattered. Because she believed contribution would be remembered. Because she believed fairness was inevitable. That was her second mistake. Power does not remember kindness. It remembers control. When the younger woman appeared, it wasn't dramatic. No scandal. No exposure. Just a presence. That didn't question, didn't contribute, didn't invest. She was effortless. Uncomplicated. Admiring. And suddenly, the woman who had helped build everything felt heavy. She doesn't understand my pressure. He said once, casually. She expects too much. Too much. Years of unpaid labor. Reduced to a flaw. That was when she understood something critical. Her value had been tied to how useful she was. Not how irreplaceable. And usefulness has an expiration date. She stayed silent as the younger woman smiled. Not maliciously. Not knowingly. Simply existing. Every compliment the man received now was reflected in her shadow. She's got potential, they'd say. She's impressive. And the weight pressed harder. Her contributions invisible. Her efforts taken for granted. Her name unspoken. She began noticing small shifts in routine. Appointments she once organized were now managed by the new presence. Conversations she once led were subtly redirected. Even friends began adjusting language. Not overtly, but in hints. The careful choice of words, the way stories were told. Everything emphasized the new face. She felt her space shrink. The man's world expanded. And yet, she stayed, because retreat felt like defeat. She reminded herself, patience is power. Trust is loyalty. Silence is strength. But silence has a cost. And loyalty, once assumed, is easily repurposed. The first pang of anger was not toward the man, nor the young woman. It was at herself. For giving too much. For believing the world would repay honesty. For thinking her commitment was enough. She remembered moments of doubt, tiny, fleeting, ignored. Now, they roared like warnings. And in the quiet of her apartment, after the lights dimmed, and the laughter of gatherings faded, she confronted the truth. The foundation she thought secure was shifting. The pillars she trusted were being used, not shared. And she realized, she had the choice to crumble. Or to watch, learn, and prepare. Her eyes hardened, not with hate, but with clarity. She would not be invisible again. She would not be used again. And when the moment came, the world would see it. Weeks passed. The gatherings continued, laughter echoing, yet she felt detached. Each smile she offered felt heavier. Each compliment she gave was weighed in silence. She began documenting details for herself. Notes on behavior, timelines, conversations. Patterns emerged. Small, almost imperceptible shifts. That, added together, painted a new reality. She stopped explaining herself. Questions once asked were now answered internally. Opinions once shared aloud were stored privately, analyzed carefully. Even the younger woman, unaware of the silent scrutiny, started to reveal habits, reactions, tendencies. The more effortless she seemed, the more mistakes became visible. Tiny cracks in the facade. The man, caught in the new rhythm, did not notice the growing awareness. Confidence in his plan had dulled his observation. And for the first time, she smiled. A quiet, internal smile. Not for revenge, not yet. Simply because she had clarity. She recognized the difference between power and control. Influence and ownership. Trust and blind faith. The past months of quiet endurance were not wasted. Every ignored instinct, every silent observation, was building a foundation for what was next. She realized she no longer feared confrontation. Her value was not in waiting for recognition. It was in knowing, seeing, planning. And planning, she knew, was strength. She started taking small actions. Not reckless, not obvious. Each movement calculated, deliberate. Every decision aligned with her newfound awareness. At the office, she suggested changes. Minor at first, then larger. Nothing overtly challenging, but everything subtly shifting the balance. Colleagues noticed the difference. The man noticed, too, eventually. But by then, the trajectory had changed. The dynamic could no longer be ignored. She reached out to contacts she had maintained silently. Old friends. Trusted colleagues. Connections she had invested in without applause. They remembered her. They respected her. They responded. Her confidence grew quietly, like roots spreading underground. Before the first visible bloom. In the evenings, she reviewed her observations. Checked her plans against reality. Each step refined. Each detail accounted for. And all the while, she kept her emotions in check. No overt display. No confrontation. Just the subtle, steady movement of someone who finally understood the board. It was not instant. It was not dramatic. It was inevitable. She had the clarity of someone who has waited. The patience of someone who has endured, and the resolve of someone who will not repeat the mistakes of the past. The younger woman, oblivious, continued to shine. The man continued to believe he controlled the scene. But slowly, imperceptibly, the power had begun to shift. And she was ready to step into it. The first real opportunity arrived quietly. A project assigned to both of them, high stakes, visible to the entire team. A chance to prove competence, and claim credit. She observed. She measured. She waited for the exact moment to act. The younger woman volunteered for minor tasks, thinking they were harmless. The man delegated responsibility. Without realizing the balance had shifted. She stepped forward only when necessary, adding value, steering the work subtly. Praise from colleagues reached her indirectly, without triggering suspicion. Every success, every contribution, built on careful calculation. Not out of malice, not to humiliate, but to assert presence and reclaim power. Her patience was becoming visible. Her work undeniable. Her name repeated in meetings. Her influence creeping into decisions. The man began to sense a change. A subtle resistance. An awareness that wasn't there before. His confidence wavered. And she remained calm. Silent strength radiated from her. No outbursts, no confrontations, just the slow, inevitable reshaping of authority and respect. By the end of the week, her role had transformed. The younger woman still smiled. The man still believed he led. But now, the currents had shifted, and she knew she controlled the tides. The next phase required precision. Visibility without arrogance. Influence without confrontation. She chose her allies carefully. Not everyone could be trusted. Some were ambitious, some careless, some too loyal to see beyond the surface. She mapped relationships, the flow of information, and the subtle power dynamics. That governed every decision. At every meeting, she listened more than she spoke. Each word from others was a clue. Each glance, each hesitation, revealed priorities and hidden tensions. She began to plant suggestions strategically. Ideas that seemed casual, but nudged the outcome subtly. Moments of recognition came slowly, as colleagues began citing her insight. Without realizing the depth of her orchestration. The younger woman, still unaware, continued her effortless charm. But cracks appeared. Mistakes small, yet consequential, hinted at the limits of her presence. The man, distracted by the new energy, failed to notice the shift fully. His attention was fragmented, his trust misplaced. Meanwhile, she reinforced her visibility. Every success, every insight, added to her credibility. Her influence became undeniable, her presence essential, and for the first time in months, she felt control. Quiet, patient, inevitable control. Not revenge yet, but the foundation had been laid. The turning point approached subtly. A high-profile client meeting. The man assumed dominance. The younger woman smiled effortlessly. The team looked to them for guidance. She arrived prepared. Every fact, every figure, every scenario had been anticipated. She listened first, gauged the mood, then offered insight. Calm, concise, compelling. Her words were not loud, but they carried weight. Colleagues began to nod, eyes shifting toward her. She guided decisions without overtly directing. Influence was hers, quietly, yet undeniably. The man sensed the change, but could not name it. Pride clouded perception. He misread every cue. The younger woman tried to shine, but her mistakes became visible. Small errors, overlooked before, now magnified by scrutiny. She maintained composure, watching the dynamics unfold. Every subtle shift calculated. Every reaction noted. Every opportunity stored for later. By the meeting's end, her role was undeniable. Credit flowed naturally toward her, without confrontation, without drama. She realized then, fully, power is not taken by force. It is claimed by presence, patience, and strategy. The aftermath was subtle but significant. Conversations shifted. Recommendations were now weighted with her opinion. Meetings began with her insights, not his. She maintained grace. No gloating, no showing of triumph. Just the quiet certainty that her presence mattered more than ever. The younger woman began to notice the shift in influence. Confusion, frustration, and self-doubt crept into her effortless charm. Every smile now carried tension. Every decision required reflection. The man struggled to adjust. Old habits died hard. Delegations that once reinforced his dominance, now backfired subtly. Colleagues increasingly relied on her judgment. Recognition came quietly but undeniably. Outside the office, she strengthened networks. She connected with clients personally. She offered guidance to those seeking support. Her credibility grew beyond the team into circles previously inaccessible. She realized the power of preparation, patience, and observation. Revenge was unnecessary. Her rise was inevitable, because competence and strategy cannot be ignored. At home, she reflected on months past. Every slight, every dismissal, every ignored suggestion, they had led her here. And she smiled quietly, knowing the foundation she built was unshakable. The first part of her journey was complete. The next phase would require even more precision, but she was ready. She had learned, adapted, and grown. The weekend arrived, bringing a company gala. A showcase of influence and status. The man assumed dominance. The younger woman sparkled effortlessly. She entered quietly, poised and self-assured. Her dress simple but elegant, her presence commanding without effort. The room buzzed with conversation. She observed carefully, noting alliances, whispers, and intentions. Every interaction was a piece of the puzzle, each laugh, glance, and compliment a clue. She approached the bar subtly, not seeking attention, but noting who engaged and how. Her glass of wine became a tool of observation, her calm demeanor masking calculation. Colleagues approached with questions, seeking guidance. Her insight offered subtly, without assertion, shifted opinions naturally. She influenced without visible force. The younger woman misstepped. A comment, a misjudged reaction, exposed insecurity beneath charm. Eyes turned. Observers noticed. The man remained unaware of the subtle shift. His pride blinded him, obscuring reality. She realized, power does not require confrontation. It requires observation, patience, and timing, and with those, victory is inevitable. By the night's end, her influence was visible. Her presence respected. Her control subtle, yet complete. She had arrived at the first major milestone. The journey continued, but the foundation had been firmly established. The following week brought new challenges. Projects expanded, deadlines tightened. The man assumed control as usual, confident in his authority. She observed, unflinching. Every move he made, every word he spoke, she catalogued mentally. Patterns emerged. Weaknesses, unnoticed before, became opportunities for subtle guidance. Colleagues sought her opinion increasingly. Her recommendations carried weight. Her input shaped strategies, even when she remained in the background. The younger woman attempted to assert influence, but subtle mistakes undermined her. She remained charming, but uncertain. The gap between appearance and reality widened. He still believed he led, but the undercurrent had shifted. Small decisions, guided subtly by her hand, changed outcomes. Credit flowed naturally toward her. She nurtured relationships outside the office. Clients, contacts, industry insiders. All influenced indirectly, aware of her competence, not her ambition. At home, she reflected. Months of quiet preparation, observation, and patience had accumulated into strength. Not explosive, not dramatic, but solid, unshakable. She understood finally, true power is invisible until it manifests. It is patience, strategy, and quiet mastery. And now, she was ready. The next phase would be decisive, and the foundation was unbreakable. A new project demanded cross-department collaboration. The man assumed leadership confidently, believing the path was clear. She remained observant. Details mattered more than appearance. Every interaction, every report, every meeting was a chance to shift influence subtly. She identified key players. Those whose decisions carried weight. She engaged with them quietly, building trust, demonstrating competence, without revealing the extent of her strategy. The younger woman attempted to charm clients, but subtle missteps revealed gaps. Confidence faltered under scrutiny, her effortless shine dulled. The man noticed tension but misread it. He interpreted hesitation as minor distractions. Yet, the pattern was clear to those paying attention, control was quietly shifting. By midweek, her influence grew. Ideas she suggested were implemented seamlessly. Praise began to follow her, without the need for confrontation or drama. At home, she reviewed every interaction. She mapped influence, prepared contingencies, and anticipated reactions with precision. Months of quiet work were culminating into a force both subtle and undeniable. She reflected, power grows quietly, patience, observation, preparation. Those who rush are overlooked. Those who wait, ready, succeed. And she was ready. The next step would define her authority. Every detail was aligned. Every relationship nurtured. Every opportunity noted. The day of the project presentation arrived. High-ranking executives attended. The man prepared a confident introduction. The younger woman rehearsed her charm. She stayed calm. Prepared, observant, composed. She let others speak first, gathering reactions, noting expectations. When it was her turn, she presented with clarity and precision. Figures, insights, and solutions. All perfectly timed, all strategically placed. The room reacted. Subtle nods, quiet murmurs, attentive eyes. Her contribution undeniable, yet unassuming. The younger woman faltered slightly. Her points, previously praised, now met skepticism. Small mistakes magnified under scrutiny. The man struggled to regain attention. Every attempt redirected subtly by her insight. She guided decisions without claiming authority. By the end, her influence was clear. Executives sought her opinion before his. The balance had shifted irrevocably. She reflected quietly, control is not loud. Power is subtle. It is preparation, patience, and observation, combined with the courage to act when needed. She had reached a milestone. Her presence demanded respect. Her influence quietly undeniable, and she knew this was only the beginning. The real tests were still to come. After the presentation, subtle shifts continued. Conversations in the office changed tone. Colleagues sought her input more openly. Her reputation spread quietly, yet firmly. The younger woman became hesitant. Every attempt to charm or dominate was met with unspoken observation. She realized the balance of power was no longer in her favor. The man tried to assert authority. His directives, once unquestioned, now faced gentle resistance. Colleagues deferred to her judgment. She maintained composure, never overstepping, never gloating. Influence was her ally, patience her tool, observation her strategy. Outside work, she strengthened networks. Clients appreciated her insight, industry contacts valued her reliability. Opportunities multiplied quietly, each reinforcing her position. At home, she reflected. Months of careful planning and patient observation had accumulated into undeniable influence. Her rise was not explosive, not dramatic, but steady, strong, and permanent. She understood fully, true authority is earned, not demanded. It is quiet, strategic, and patient, but once established, it is unstoppable. And now, the next challenge awaited. The final test of skill, of patience, of subtle power mastery, was approaching. The next week brought a critical client pitch. Executives and high-profile clients gathered. The man prepared his speech with confidence. The younger woman rehearsed, hoping to shine. She observed silently, analyzing every detail, every nuance, every potential misstep. Her patience had been long, her preparation meticulous. When her turn came, she spoke with clarity and precision. Each recommendation supported by facts. Each point strategically placed. The room reacted immediately. Interest peaked, questions were directed toward her. Subtle glances confirmed the shift. Her authority was recognized, without confrontation, without drama. The younger woman faltered under pressure. Charm alone could not cover gaps in understanding. Her previous confidence wavered. The man tried to redirect attention, but colleagues were already guided subtly by her insight. The momentum had shifted. Control, previously assumed, now rested quietly in her hands. She smiled softly, aware of the accomplishment. No boasts, no overt victory. Her influence had grown quietly, powerfully, and her strategy was complete. By evening, conversations echoed her contributions. Praise, credit, and respect flowed naturally. She had reached a pivotal point in her career. At home, reflection brought clarity. Months of patient observation, meticulous planning, and subtle influence had culminated into undeniable success. The foundation was solid, the path forward clear. She was ready for the next phase. Her journey of quiet mastery had proven that patience, strategy, and skill always prevail. Weeks passed, and her influence solidified further. She no longer needed to push, her suggestions were implemented naturally. The man struggled to retain relevance. Every decision he made was subtly countered by her insight. The younger woman became increasingly cautious. Her charm was no longer enough. She realized the shift in office dynamics, the subtle control of influence resting with someone else. At meetings, her words carried weight. Colleagues sought her guidance before his. She provided direction quietly, never drawing attention to herself. Her home life reflected the changes at work. Confidence and control radiated from her. She felt empowered in every decision, in every conversation, in every action. Her network outside the office grew. Clients and industry insiders began seeking her expertise. Opportunities multiplied. Every interaction reinforced her position. She reflected on her journey, months of patience, observation, and strategic action had led to this pivotal moment. Her influence was undeniable, yet achieved quietly. She understood that true power is never loud. It is subtle, it is earned, and it is respected. She had reached a level few anticipated, and she had done so without overt confrontation. Now, the next challenge awaited, bigger, more complex, but she felt prepared, confident, and ready. Her mastery of subtle influence, her patience, and strategic thinking would ensure she succeeded, even in the most challenging circumstances. The final quarter approached, bringing high-stakes decisions. Budgets, investments, and client negotiations dominated schedules. The man assumed control, unaware of the quiet power shift. He relied on old methods, old influence, while she adapted, observed, and acted strategically. Her patience had honed precision. Every suggestion, every interaction, every subtle gesture was timed perfectly to influence outcomes. Colleagues responded, often unconsciously, to her guidance. The younger woman struggled more openly. Charm and superficial knowledge no longer sufficed. Her uncertainty became visible, and the office noticed. She maintained a calm demeanor, never pushing, never asserting. Her power was invisible but unmistakable. Every decision reflected her influence. Outside work, her network solidified. Clients began seeking her expertise directly. Her reputation extended beyond the office. Opportunities multiplied, reinforcing her authority. Home life mirrored her professional growth. Confidence, clarity, and purpose radiated in every action. She felt empowered, self-assured, and ready for the ultimate test of her skills. The final challenge would come soon. A complex negotiation, high stakes, where subtle influence and strategic patience would be tested to their fullest. She reflected quietly, knowing she was prepared. Months of careful observation, meticulous planning, and calculated influence had brought her here. She would succeed. She had to. And she would do it with quiet mastery. The day of the high-stakes negotiation arrived. Executives, clients, and investors gathered. The man prepared confidently, relying on experience and reputation. The younger woman polished her presentation, hoping to impress. She observed silently, noting every expression, every hesitation, every subtle interaction. Months of preparation had sharpened her instincts. She understood motivations, fears, and ambitions, mapping the room with careful attention. When she spoke, her voice was steady, her points concise yet persuasive. Each fact, each recommendation, was strategically placed to guide outcomes. The room reacted to her insight. Questions were directed toward her. Subtle nods confirmed agreement. Her influence became undeniable, yet she remained composed, unassuming. The man tried to regain control, but colleagues subtly deferred to her judgment. The younger woman stumbled under scrutiny, her attempts at charm faltering. By the end, decisions aligned with her recommendations. Credit flowed quietly in her direction. She had guided the negotiation with skill and subtlety, without conflict or confrontation. At home, she reflected on the progress. Months of patience, careful observation, and strategic influence had produced results. She realized her quiet mastery had reached its peak. The final phase would test her further, but confidence, preparation, and subtle power would ensure she succeeded beyond expectation. Her journey of quiet strategy and influence had proven that real power is earned, not claimed. The final phase arrived, a corporate merger negotiation. High stakes, high visibility. Executives, clients, and board members watched closely. The man prepared confidently, relying on old methods. The younger woman rehearsed charm and presentation. She observed quietly, mapping personalities, intentions, and vulnerabilities. When discussions began, tension filled the room. Every word, every gesture, every glance counted. She listened carefully, noting hesitations and reactions. Her turn to speak came. Calm, precise, and strategic, she presented solutions that addressed every concern. Her reasoning was sound, her recommendations persuasive. The room responded immediately. Questions flowed toward her, and her answers guided decisions subtly but firmly. The man attempted intervention, but her influence redirected conversations before he could regain control. The younger woman struggled, faltering under scrutiny. Charm alone was ineffective. She realized her position was no longer central. By the end of the day, agreements aligned with her strategy. Credit for success quietly flowed to her. Her patience, observation, and strategic influence had culminated in undeniable authority. At home, she reflected. Months of careful planning and subtle action had produced tangible, undeniable results. Her influence was established, her power quietly respected. She understood fully, true mastery is subtle, patient, and strategic. And she had proven herself beyond doubt. The final evening arrived, and with it, reflection. Months of calculated observation, patience, and strategy had brought her to a point of undeniable mastery. At work, her influence was recognized. Executives, clients, and colleagues sought her insight. The man, once confident in his control, accepted the subtle reality, power had shifted quietly, irrevocably. The younger woman, once ambitious and charming, now observed with hesitation, uncertain of her position. Charm and superficiality could not compete. With preparation, observation, and strategic thinking, she realized that her journey was about more than authority. It was about understanding people, timing, and the art of subtle influence. Every challenge had tested her patience and skill, every victory had been earned quietly, deliberately. At home, she reflected on her growth. Confidence, clarity, and a sense of empowerment radiated through every action. Her influence extended beyond office walls, into networks, opportunities, and relationships. She had achieved mastery, quiet, subtle, undeniable. Power was no longer a question of force or volume, it was a matter of preparation, patience, and strategic observation. Looking forward, she knew more challenges awaited. But she felt ready, capable, and confident. The journey of subtle influence and strategic mastery had proven itself, and she was prepared to continue, ever patient, ever observant, ever in control. And in that quiet moment, she smiled. Not from triumph over others, but from the quiet mastery of her own path, earned, deserved, and undeniable.